Just wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Tell me a little bit about your background, and I know you've been in the armed forces, and tell me a bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, of course. I'm Andrew. Um, I've just finished just over 24 years serving in the Royal Navy. So basically, when I left university back in the 1990s, I worked as a survey engineer for a Scandinavian company actually. So worked in the private sector for a while. Um, but I was quite taken with the idea of doing hydrographic surveying. And at the time, I thought it'd be a good idea to look at options as to where I could do that. And it seemed fairly obvious that joining the Royal Navy would be a good way to seg into that industry.
What's
Um,
hydrographic surveying? What is that?
Hydrographic surveying, mapping the seabed, essentially, in
Okay.
layman's terms, mainly for the safety of navigation at sea. But there are other uses for it. Particularly today, you have things like building wind farms at sea. You really need to know what you're dealing with the seabed, and obviously you can't just look over your window. You need to do some proper surveying.
Yeah.
So I joined as a warfare officer, and fairly soon after that, I specialised as a hydrographic, meteorological, and oceanographic specialist. Um, Thoroughly enjoyed my military career. Travelled to Indonesia, South China Sea, Singapore. Quite a lot of time in the Middle East. It was quite a busy period for the armed forces around the Middle East during my time in the services. I spent quite a bit of time off the east coast of America as well, working up the jets on aircraft carriers.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I had a great time doing that, doing the things that I wanted to do.
And when did you leave?
So I left in spring last year.
Yeah.
I left a little earlier than the plan, um, primarily because I wanted to go off and do something different before I hit 50.
Yeah. So what would you say were the highlights of your Royal Navy career?
I think working with the Harriers was a bit of a highlight for me. Working in military aviation, and probably the thing that I miss most having left is the people more than anything else. You build up a really good network of colleagues and friends and acquaintances as you go through your career.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something that I really miss as well, is the camaraderie, the banter. It's part of the best bit about being in the forces, isn't it? So
Yeah, yeah.
so what are you doing now?
So, so I had a bit of a plan when I left. I had a few things that I had an idea of what I'd like to do, but what it's boiled down to now is I work as a defence consultant. I also work at a place called Land Rover Experience as an off-road instructor. The thing I'm really concentrating on is my own business.
Okay.
I decided that I wanted to work for myself and I set up my own business when I left.
And what is that business?
So basically, I set up a company that deals in providing a drone surveying service. Drones are really useful in getting to out of reach places. So setting up a survey and an inspection business seemed like a good idea to me, particularly with my background.
So what sort of things do you survey as part with your drones?
Essentially, what we're focusing on are several different sectors. So we look at the construction sector and certain industries, and we can do plenty of things within those areas. We can track project progress through imagery, so you can build up a picture of how your project is progressing. You can do pretty accurate surveying using GPS and ground control points, so you can get up to a centimetre accuracy with your surveys, and that provides some 2D mapping for CAD overlays and topography surveys. We also look at volumetric, so cut and fill surveys. So you get asked just how much of what quantity of materials you have on a site. You can use your drone to very quickly work that out for the client. It's building condition surveys, roofs that are pretty hard to get to, but I think equally, if not more important, is the heat loss aspect. So as we move to a more sustainable and renewable future, we're going to have to make sure that the buildings that we work and live in are actually maintain their heat levels to the
Yeah.
best of their ability with efficient ground
Yeah.
source heat pump or air source heat pumps. So if you're losing heat through your windows or your roof or wherever it is, we can do some infrared surveys that'll give you an idea of where those heat losses are occurring. We can do surveys on renewable sites, particularly solar PV farms,
Yeah.
and give an operator an idea of where their solar panels are failing,
Yeah.
with pretty accurate results.
Yeah.
And I recently did a survey on a vineyard, which was nice, a multispectral survey to give an idea of the farmer where their crops potentially need a little bit of help.
Okay, so when you're talking about doing your vineyard survey, so you know that could support a sort of agricultural aspect as well. So there's lots of things you can do with drones. I hadn't realized that it was so broad what you can do with them.
Well, I think most people think, and certainly my wife thought this when I suggested this as an option. Most people think that drones, you throw them up there, you take some pretty pictures, some fantastic videos, and that's about all that they do. But there's way more that they can deliver, and they can do it efficiently. They can do it safely.
Yeah.
You imagine getting personnel up to a high tower to inspect, I don't know, a TV aerial mast or a roof that's potentially compromised in some way. Actually, it's safer to send a drone up there to do an initial look,
Yeah.
and give an indication of where there might be failure and where things need to be addressed. You
Yeah.
also save money as well. So instead of paying for expensive scaffolding, you can send your drone up to take some imagery and look at it that way. And then on the other side of the fence, I guess, if you send up an infrared drone and you identify where a solar PV installation has failed solar cells, you can replace them, and your efficiency of your site increases as well. Use the infrared drone to identify where you're getting water ingress as well. So if you've got a leaky roof, especially if you've got a flat roof, you may think that the water's coming in a particular area, but actually it's probably coming from a completely different part of the roof that you need to try and fix.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of advantages with using that sort of technology. It's quite nice to be able to contribute, to the client's needs. It's all about the data at the end of the day. Flying the drone, yeah, it's a little bit fun, and enjoyable.
Yeah.
But actually, the data that you produce for the client is the important thing. It needs to be high quality and it needs to be accurate.
That's fascinating. Do you know what? I've learned something new today. I didn't realize that they were so versatile, what you could do with them. Because like you said, I always assumed it was about taking photographs and, I just want to go back to your Navy career. And you said you worked for in the private sector first. So what was it about the Royal Navy that enticed you to join? What was it something you'd always thought about? How did
Nope.
that happen?
Well, back when I was younger, I toyed with the idea of flying jets and joining the RAF. But I think the honest answer is I became a little bit disillusioned with working in the private sector.
Yeah.
Um, I had a place at university to study an MSc in hydrographic surveying, but I wanted to get hands-on sooner, do something that contributed, I guess. When I did start, I did do hydrographic surveying, but an added bonus was meteorological side of it and the oceanographic side of it, because the specialization in the Royal Navy trained you in all three fields.
Yeah.
And actually, the meteorology was very interesting, and you could impact operations, or you could advise command, and the focus of their operations could change based on your advice.
So what did that give you that civilian life before that didn't give you? So what was it about, obviously you had more impact on operations. So for you personally, what made that more of an appeal to you?
Um, I think there was a perception, certainly, back in the late 90s when I joined, that there was a career for life, and excellent training, and there was a perception that the armed forces were the best in the world, I guess. There was a lure of that.
Mm.
It wasn't all roses, you have to compromise family life to a certain extent because you're deployed, you're away from home a lot. I certainly couldn't have done it without the support of my family.
Yeah.
uh, Actually, I always used to say the Navy, buy one get one free with the family, because if you've got a spouse that isn't in service, then they tend to be the one that keeps the ship running
Yeah.
while you're away. So there were pluses and minuses to a career in the armed forces, but there is in any career you go into.
How long
Um,
will you be away for normally if you were?
I think the longest I was away in a year was 10 months, of which the longest stint was 6. There are plenty of people in the armed forces that do a lot longer than that. 9-month deployments aren't unknown.
I'm just interested, you said prior to that you were quite disillusioned with working with your in the private sector. What was it you were disillusioned with?
To be honest with you, I was working in North Wales at the time, and it was the weather. I'd had enough of the rain. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably
I've lived in Anglesey. I know that very well.
it about 2.5 months slogging away over this survey on some gas lines that run right across North Wales down to Betws and across to Festiniog and then up into Anglesey. We ended up in Anglesey.
Yeah.
We were there for 3 days doing a survey, and I could hardly see the hand in front of my face. It was so foggy. But at the end of this period, I thought, right, I'm going to go into the careers office in Shrewsbury on the way home, and I did exactly that. Yeah, it's I think the weather broke me, which is ironic, as I ended up as a meteorologist.
So, projecting forward from the beginning of your career to sort of 22, 23 years, at what sort of point did you decide, you know what, this is not for me? You left a little bit earlier than planned, but what changed your thoughts around, whether to stay?
So there were a whole myriad of reasons. Um, I'd had a job, a fantastic and privileged job as a career manager, so looking after the careers and appointments of about 150 people, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And the jobs that came after that weren't quite as challenging. I became a little bit disillusioned with that. I knew that the next job that I was going to go and do, I was going to have to travel, backwards and forwards. Didn't really fancy being a weekend warrior. I was getting a bit too long in the tooth for that. There are other personal reasons that triggered it, and I started thinking about it probably around 2019. Of course, COVID came in, and I don't think COVID really influenced my decision much. It might have delayed it by a year.
So tell me about what happened then. So what did did you have an idea of what you were going to do next?
Yeah, I had an idea in my head that I wanted to work for myself.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something that interested me. I wanted to do something that you keen to get out of bed in the morning. And I had probably 4 or 5 strands of or ideas of where I wanted to go. One of the ideas was perhaps training the military in my trade, and there was a potential opportunity to do that. I went to an off-road centre as a freebie, really. And while I was there, I spoke to an ex-service person, and rather tongue-in-cheek, said, "Any chance of a job?" And he said, "Well, yeah, have a chat with the centre manager." And I did exactly that. I was approached to do a bit of defence consultancy, so
Yeah.
I'm doing a little bit of that as well. So I've got a couple of part-time jobs, and then I quite like the idea of that, because starting your own business is not an easy thing to do. You need to go into it with your eyes wide open, and you also need to have, in my opinion, you also need to have a little bit of a safety net, I guess. They give you a little bit of income that you wouldn't necessarily have if you just concentrated purely on the business, and B, they allow you to forget about, for a period of time, forget about the accounts and the website and the marketing and the networking. Just give you a bit of respite from all of that.
So why drones? Why did you pick that?
So, as part of the career transition partnership, you get offerings of certain courses. So I rather tongue-in-cheek thought, well, that looks quite interesting, because I'd been involved to a certain extent with the drone development in the Royal Navy. Talking to some of the people who were involved in that, and had flown some drones as well while I was still in service.
Yeah.
But the more I looked at it, the more I thought, okay, this isn't just about flying the drone. This is about the data, as I was saying before. The data is the important thing.
Yeah.
And what I've been doing for, the previous 2.5 decades was data. Take the data, add value to it, interpret it, and give it to the client at the end of your analysis,
Yeah.
and making it as accurate as possible. So, given the experience that I'd had in the forces and beforehand, because obviously surveying before I joined up, it's equally as important there too. It made sense to me. That's quite aside. Doing the training and getting qualified and experienced in that level is quite a different thing to running your own business, I would say.
Yeah. So were there any surprises? If you're looking back at, your beginning of your business, was there anything you just completely weren't prepared for at all?
Oh yeah, all of it. I know more about website production and creation now than I ever want to.
Yes, yeah,
And I know more about prepping a company for cyber safety and all of these things that actually probably aren't probably aren't that interesting to you, and they just sort of happened when you're in the armed forces because there's a whole bunch of people that deal with that sort of thing, so you can get on with your frontline job. But actually, running your own business, the buck stops with you. So taking all of that, um, it was all a massive learning curve. Sitting down quietly and having a moment isn't that much of a common theme at the minute. There's always something happening.
yeah. There's always something, like you say, the buck stops with you, doesn't it? You have to sort of keep going, and you can't just have a day when you just don't feel like it. You need to sort of keep plugging away, don't
Yeah.
you? It's completely relate. What was it? What would you say that your skills from your Royal Navy career have you brought into your business?
I think self-discipline is probably the key thing.
Yeah,
Um, it could be really easy just to say, oh, I don't think I'll do that today. I'll do that tomorrow because it's your business. You can do what you want. You can say, well, I'll sack that off. That's not important. I can do this another time. Um, but actually having the self-discipline to just get on with it,
yeah,
having a to-do list
yeah,
and actually doing it
yeah,
instead of just having it on the list. It's not just enough to have a to-do list and say, right, I'll tick that off later. You've got to grab it and deal with it.
yeah.
Um, I guess the key difference being that you had a team of people around you that you could work with to achieve all of those aims. Is lonely the right word? No, I don't think lonely is the right word. It's more of a challenge than a different kind of challenge is probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah. Thinking about your well-being, because I felt a difference from working as in the RAF to having my own business. I feel like I'm in a better place in terms of my well-being. I've got more flexibility with my family. How would you say you feel now compared to your Royal Navy career?
I'd agree with you. Yeah, you are the master of your own destiny. But there are times where you think, oh, this is a bit of a slog. I wasn't expecting to have to do all of this. If you're honest about it, um, it's a different kind of pressure, um, different kind of mindset that you need to run your own business. Um, I feel more in control of things, definitely.
Yeah,
Um, you know, as you know, when you're wearing a uniform, you jump when you're told to jump, and you lords and masters tell you when and where. Whereas in this case, it's me telling myself to jump. I'm pleased with my decision. I'm glad I did what I did, and I do feel better for it.
if somebody was watching this and was thinking about either leaving a long-term career, whether that be in the armed forces or in a corporate organization or something, what would your advice be to them if they're thinking about going to do something totally different?
So what I did was I sat down with a blank piece of paper and I wrote down all sorts of pros and cons. Probably the most important one was, if I do this, can I still pay the mortgage?
Yeah,
And I think financial security leads to better mental health as well because you're not worrying about that. So I would sit down with a piece of paper and just work out whether or not you can afford to do it first.
yeah,
And I know it's easy to say and fairly hard to predict because when you're going into business, you don't know if it's going to be successful or not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
giving yourself some sort of buffer
Mhm.
in case the business isn't successful is quite important as well.
Mm.
So another thing I would do is talk to people, talk to as many people as you can about this, and you'll start to build up a picture of people's opinions, people's experiences. One of the key things that came up for me when I was talking to people was be useful to have another part-time job as
Yeah.
you start to build your business. And as you build your business, you can walk away from that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you're still getting an income coming in there as well. And another piece of advice was there'll always be people that offer to help you, but the bottom line is they'll always be looking for money to do it. It's very
Mm.
different. It's very different on the civilian side of it
Yeah.
because it revolves around people's businesses as well. But there's help to be had, and there's people you can talk to. So the Career Transition Partnership, very helpful, very useful to talk to them. Some of the courses that they provide,
Yeah.
make full use of those. There's an organisation called X Forces.
Yeah.
And it's a charity that provides a huge amount of advice to potential business owners,
Yeah.
and you can talk to them and go to their free seminars, networking events, and courses.
And
X Forces is for military people and their affiliates, so your family members. So it's a really useful resource, X Forces, to talk to when you're initially thinking about what you're doing. But it's equally important, if not more important, to talk to people within the industry you're thinking of going into.
what you mean to find out about competition or?
So my experience is there are people that are quite happy to talk to you, potential competitors, and really quite helpful. And there are some that are very tight-lipped and see you as a threat.
Mm.
Um, so you just have to suck it and see. You have to be quite forward in talking to people. If they won't talk to you, they won't talk to you. But you'll find that quite a few will and talk you through their pitfalls and their concerns and worries. Um, I've no doubt whatsoever that the people I've been talking to and have been doing that have kept some of it back, because it's sensible to do so. But you could talk to people, ex-service people who are doing what you want to do, the other side of the country if you want, that probably aren't going to be much of a competitor, and get some advice from them too. But the important thing is it's down to you. You're the one. It won't come to you. You can't build a website and expect to get a load of business from a website. Magically, you have to get out there and network.
So what kind of networking would you recommend for somebody starting their new business?
So for me, I joined the Federation of Small Businesses. They do networking events through X Forces. And as I've done that, I've started to build up a bit of a picture of how businesses work, but not so much the business that I've gone into. So what I've done personally is go through social media websites such as LinkedIn, and reached out to people and talked to people through that. Most of the networking I've done, and this is a hangover from COVID, I think, has been done virtually. But I'm starting to see, I don't know what your experiences are, I'm starting to see more face-to-face networking events happening now, which I think is better. But don't forget to leverage your own network. You'll have a network from the armed forces, and your Oppo will probably have an Oppo who is doing what you want to do. Just start talking to people and be open about what you're thinking.
Amazing.
And you'll invariably find that there will be people that will help you.
And would you say through networking is the way that you found most of your clients, or the other things you could use to find clients?
So initially, yeah, some of the jobs that I've had so far have come through either people I know directly or people who've passed me on. I'd like to expand that much further. So, I'm hitting the social media sites and talking to people, and I'm getting a decent hit rate. People getting back to me. That's really interesting. Could we talk about that? I've had a few meetings with people that are interested and didn't realize or appreciate exactly what the capability could give to them.
Yeah.
So it's all about educating. It's a fairly new industry,
Yeah.
and there's plenty of people out there, both in a personal capacity, but certainly from a business perspective, who don't really understand the capability, or more importantly, don't understand the legalities surrounding what you're allowed to do with
Mm,
whatever drone size you've got. So you could go out to Argos or Amazon and pick yourself a drone up fairly easily.
yeah.
But actually, you may be flying it once you get out of the box, flying it illegally, which could land you in a bit of trouble. It's only a problem until something happens, and what you don't want to be is the person in the situation when that something does happen, because it can backfire quite significantly, especially if you injure somebody else or something.
That's a good point, actually, because there's, like you said earlier, there's so many elements to running a business that you perhaps don't even know when you start, and you find more and more things, don't you? You know, how to manage data and, you know, like the legality side, you know, the insurance, the marketing.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I think that leads us nicely on to tell me a little bit more about your ideal client. Who are you looking for, and how can they get in touch with you?
My ideal client would be somebody who had a decision-making authority within a certain business. So within construction and within the insurance industry, or people who wanted to collaborate. I suppose an example might well be surveyors who have traditionally used ground-based systems to survey, but maybe a drone would enhance their business as well. So it's not just about taking business away from other people, it's about working collaboratively too. I'd like to talk to people and companies that operate solar farms, solar installations, because there's quite a lot that we could deliver to them with regards to the performance of their solar farm. And also within the agricultural industry as well. I have farmers in my family, and I know that sometimes it takes a while for technology to trickle down to those sorts of areas as well. So it's all about educating and trying to do that through the means of social media such as LinkedIn as well. And there are quite a few drone operators on LinkedIn that who write some interesting articles about the way the industry is progressing.
Mm.
We do have a website, www.ozcam.uk, and can be reached on the email address info@ozcam.uk as well.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been fascinating hearing your story and hearing how your business has evolved, and I've definitely learned something from today. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us, and hopefully this will get out there and bring you some new clients. So thanks very much for your time.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.